wilderness held its breath as the man and his dog moved carefully through the thick forest. Tall trees loomed above, their leaves brushing softly in the gentle wind, while patches of sunlight scattered across the mossy ground. The dog's paws barely made a sound, but suddenly he stopped. His ears pricked, and a low, steady growl rose deep from his chest. The man froze, eyes searching the dim undergrowth, where the dog's gaze fixed like a laser. There, barely visible, a shadow shifted, a figure standing just out of clear sight, blending with the dark shapes of the trees. The man's pulse quickened as he studied the figure. It did not move like a traveler, lost, or a wanderer passing by. The dog's growl grew louder, a warning that stirred the stillness. The animal's senses caught something the man could not yet understand. "What do you see?" he asked softly, though the answer lay in the dog's fierce stance. The dog's body was taut, every muscle ready to react, and his eyes never left the shadowy presence. The forest seemed suddenly colder, heavier, as if the trees themselves leaned in to watch what would happen next. A long moment passed before the dog took a cautious step closer, growling steadily now. The man tightened his grip on the leash and lowered his voice. "We should not wait here." The figure moved again, slow but deliberate. The man felt a sudden rush of fear, not panic, but clear, sharp warning. The dog had seen danger first. Together they turned, moving back through the woods. The dog alerted his side, growling softly like a heartbeat beneath the silence. They barely glanced behind, trusting that the dog's warning had saved them from something they could not face. The man's breath was steady but quiet as he followed the dog deeper into the forest, eyes darting to every dark shape around them. The dog moved like a silent guardian, muscles coiled with tension, senses stretched to the edge. Every snap of a twig, every rustle of leaves seemed sharper now, filled with unseen meaning. The forest was no longer a peaceful refuge. It had become a maze of hidden threats. The stranger's presence hung like a shadow just beyond the edge of vision, and the dog's warning echoed in the man's mind, a persistent beat he could not ignore. They pressed on, weaving between trees and over roots slick with moss. The dog paused again, ears twitching, then turned to look back over his shoulder with a warning that chilled the man's blood. The figure had not followed, or at least not yet, but the silence behind them was heavy, thick with tension. "We need to find a place to hide," the man murmured, the words almost lost beneath the whispers of the forest. The dog's eyes met his, dark and knowing. They moved faster now, slipping into a thicket where shadows gathered like a cloak, holding their breasts together beneath the canopy. Inside the dense brush, the man crouched low, heart pounding beneath the weight of the unknown. The dog settled beside him, body still but alert, every nerve stretched tight. The silence around them was broken only by the distant call of a bird, but the feeling of being watched grew stronger. The man whispered to the dog, "Whatever that was, it is not far." The dog's growl was a soft warning, barely more than a breath, yet it carried the promise that they would face whatever came next. Together. Outside the hiding place, the shadow moved once more, close enough to be heard, close enough to be feared. The forest felt alive with a quiet menace as the man and his dog stayed motionless, hidden beneath the thick tangle of branches. Every breath they took was shallow, as if even the smallest sound might draw the stranger's attention. The dog's ears flicked toward every noise, the rustle of dry leaves, the snap of a distant twig, and his eyes never left the edge of the thicket. The man's fingers tightened around the leash, heart pounding with a mix of fear and trust in his companion's instincts. Time seemed to stretch as the shadow moved slowly, searching, weaving closer in the dim light. A sudden crack broke the stillness, a broken branch snapping underfoot. The dog's growl deepened, a warning rumble that vibrated through the air like thunder before a storm. The man's pulse surged. The shadow paused, its presence nearly tangible now, just beyond the trees. The man whispered, "Stay close." The dog shifted beside him, muscles ready to spring, eyes fierce but calm. They were no longer just running from something unknown. They were being hunted. And yet the dog's fierce loyalty anchored the man, steadying him in the heart of the forest's dark embrace. Minutes passed like hours as the man scanned the forest, trying to catch a glimpse of the figure. Then, without warning, the dog's body tensed as if sensing the final moment was near. The stranger stepped into a narrow clearing, just visible through the trees. His eyes met the man's for a brief, frozen second, a silent message of threat. But the dog stepped forward, a low growl rumbling through the clearing. The man felt the weight of the moment, knowing this was the line they could not cross. The forest held its breath again, waiting to see who would make the next move. The stranger's gaze lingered a moment longer, sharp and unreadable beneath the shadowed brim of a worn hat. The man felt the cold weight of danger pressing in, tightening like a noose around his chest. The dog growled, low and steady, standing tall between them, a shield forged from loyalty and instinct. The forest seemed to lean in closer, every rustle and crack echoing like a warning. The stranger took a slow step forward, but the dog's posture warned that any closer would mean trouble neither could afford. Without a word, the man tugged gently at the leash, signaling the dog to move. They turned, slipping silently back through the undergrowth, their footsteps careful and light. The shadow shifted, hesitating, then vanished into the trees like smoke in the wind. The man's heart thudded hard, each beat reminding him of the narrow escape. The dog stayed close, alert, as if still guarding against a threat no longer visible, but not forgotten. The wilderness had changed. It was no longer a place of peace, but one where trust and survival hung by a thread. They pushed onward, deeper into the forest, the dog never wavering in his watchfulness. The man glanced down at his companion, feeling a surge of gratitude mixed with awe. This dog had seen what he could not, heard what went unnoticed, and saved them from a danger that lurked unseen. "We owe you everything," the man whispered, voice thick with emotion. The dog's eyes met his, calm and steady, as if saying, "We face it together." The forest stretched before them, vast, wild, and still filled with secrets waiting to unfold. The forest grew denser as the man and his dog ventured further away from the narrow clearing where danger had almost caught them. Light filtered less through the thick canopy, turning the world around them into shades of green and shadow. The dog walked steadily beside his master, alert but calm now, as if sensing the immediate threat had passed. Yet the man could still feel the weight of the stranger's presence lingering in the air, like a distant storm threatening to return. Every crackle of a twig or rustle of a leaf reminded him that safety was fragile in this wild place. The man's thoughts drifted to how deeply he relied on the dog. More than just a companion, the animal was his protector, his guide. "You saved us today," he murmured, kneeling to meet the dog's eyes. The dog's tail flicked once, a quiet acknowledgement. The man felt a surge of respect and gratitude. It was strange how a silent growl, a glance, or a shift in posture could mean the difference between life and danger. In the heart of the wilderness, they were a team bound not by words but by trust, a connection that ran deeper than any spoken promise. Night approached slowly, painting the forest with darker hues. The man searched for a clearing to rest, mindful that the stranger could still be near. The dog paused at the edge of a small glade, sniffing the air with careful intensity. The man followed his lead, feeling the cool earth beneath him and the quiet pulse of the woods around them. As the dog settled beside him, the man whispered, "We'll keep moving, but only when it's safe." In that moment, beneath the fading light, they both understood the truth. This wilderness was full of unknowns, but together, they could face whatever came next. The night wrapped the forest in a quiet blanket, thick and heavy, broken only by the distant calls of nocturnal creatures. The man and his dog lay close together in the small clearing. The dog's body pressed protectively against his master's side. Every sense was on alert, even as exhaustion tugged at their limbs. The man's eyes scanned the dark line of trees, searching for any hint of movement. Though the stranger had vanished earlier, the weight of unseen eyes lingered, filling the silence with a tension that made the air feel colder. The dog's ears twitched at every sound. The rustle of leaves, the faint snap of a twig, even the whisper of wind brushing through the branches. His low growl broke the stillness, soft but unmistakable, a reminder that danger might return without warning. The man tightened his grip on the leash, grateful for this fierce guardian who never wavered, who listened to the forest in ways he could not. "We are not alone here," the man whispered, voice barely above the breeze. The dog's eyes locked with his, steady and unyielding, as if to say, "We face it together." Time moved slowly in the watchful silence of the night. The man thought about the bond between them, how this dog had sensed the threat before he could, had warned him with nothing but a growl and a steady gaze. That quiet alertness was their shield. As dawn began to lighten the edge of the forest, hope flickered within the man's chest. The dog rose beside him, ready to lead the way once more. Whatever the stranger's purpose, whatever danger lay ahead, they would meet it as one. The wilderness might hide many secrets, but their trust would guide them through the darkest hours. The first light of dawn filtered softly through the trees, painting the forest in pale gold and gentle shadows. The man and his dog rose from the clearing, the dog's nose close to the earth, sniffing carefully as if tracing an invisible trail. The night's tension had eased, but the memory of the stranger's presence still lingered like a distant echo. Every step they took felt heavy with caution, the man trusting his companion's instincts more than ever. The dog moved deliberately, alert to every sound and movement, as if reading the forest's hidden messages. The man noticed broken branches and footprints that were not their own, signs that the stranger had passed through recently. The dog stopped suddenly, stiffening as a faint scent caught his attention. His body went rigid, and his eyes searched the trees ahead. The man whispered, "We are not alone." The dog responded with a low, warning growl, his protective spirit rising with the forest's waking sounds. The wilderness, which moments ago seemed calm and forgiving, now revealed a more dangerous side, one that demanded respect and sharp senses. They pressed on, the dog leading with quiet confidence, pulling the man toward a safer path. The man's heart beat in rhythm with his companion's steady steps, a bond forged in moments of shared fear and survival. "We survived the night," he said softly, "because you saw what I could not." The dog's tail flicked once, a silent promise of loyalty and protection. Together they moved deeper into the forest's embrace, ready to face whatever awaited beyond the next bend. The wilderness was vast and unpredictable, but their trust was a light cutting through the shadows. The forest seemed to hold its breath as the man and his dog moved cautiously along the narrow path, where sunlight struggled to break through the thick canopy above. Every rustle of leaves and distant bird call was sharpened by the dog's keen senses, making the man more aware of the invisible dangers lurking just beyond the trees. The stranger's shadow still haunted the edges of his mind, a silent reminder that the woods were no longer safe. The dog's growls, low and warning, echoed his own growing unease. Suddenly the dog stopped, ears flat and eyes locked on something hidden beyond the brush. The man squinted through the foliage, heart tightening as he caught the faint outline of movement. A figure just out of clear sight. The dog's body tense like a bowstring, muscles ready to spring. The man's voice was barely more than a whisper. "Not again!" The dog growled deeper, signaling that the threat was closer than before. They were no longer simply walking through the forest. They were being watched, tracked. Instinct took over as the dog nudged the man forward, urging him to keep moving and avoid any confrontation. The man's steps quickened, blending with the dog's urgent pace. The forest closed around them like a cage, but the dog's unwavering presence gave him strength. "Lead the way," the man said quietly, trusting the animal who had become his eyes and ears. As the shadow flickered once more in the distance, the man knew their escape depended on the dog's alertness and their ability to move swiftly before the danger caught up again. The forest thickened, the trees crowding closer like silent sentinels watching their every move. The man's footsteps slowed as the dog led him onto a narrow path, barely visible beneath layers of fallen leaves. The sunlight was weak here, filtering through the dense branches in thin, trembling shafts. The dog's body was tense but controlled, moving carefully with a steady confidence born from knowing these woods better than any stranger ever could. The man felt his own breath steady, matching the calm determination in his companion's eyes. Suddenly the dog halted, nose twitching as he caught a scent carried by the wind. His ears flicked, and a low growl rumbled from deep within. The man's heart pounded harder, sensing the invisible thread pulling tighter around them. The stranger was near, somewhere beyond the twisted trunks and shadowed underbrush. The dog's stance was firm but ready, a silent signal to be prepared for whatever lay ahead. "We are close," the man whispered, the words heavy with a mix of fear and trust. They moved cautiously forward, the dog leading with unshakable resolve, weaving through the trees with an almost instinctual grace. The man followed, every sense alert, every muscle ready. This path was their only chance, a thin line between safety and danger. As the shadows deepened and the forest closed in, the dog's eyes met the man's once again, a quiet promise passing between them. Together they would face whatever waited beyond the next bend. The wilderness was no longer just a place to wander. It had become a battleground for survival. The forest seemed to pulse with a silent rhythm as the man and his dog pressed onward, their footsteps muffled by thick layers of moss and fallen leaves. The weight of unseen eyes bore down on them, each breath drawn with growing caution. The dog's every movement was deliberate, muscles coiled beneath his sleek fur, like a predator ready to defend. The man's heart beat loudly in his chest, a drum of both fear and determination. This was no ordinary walk in the woods. It was a desperate journey to escape what lurked just out of sight. Suddenly the dog froze, nostrils flaring as he caught a scent carried by the cold morning air. His growl was low but intense, vibrating through the quiet forest like a warning bell. The man's body tensed, instinctively stepping closer to his loyal companion. Through the trees, a shadow shifted, indistinct but undeniable. The stranger was near, closer than before, closing the distance with silent steps. The man's voice was a whisper, steady despite the fear. "Stay close. We cannot let him catch us." The dog's eyes held his steady promise, unshaken and fierce. The forest around them seemed to lean in, the air thick with anticipation and dread. The dog moved forward, urging the man to follow as the path narrowed and twisted beneath tangled branches. Each step was a gamble, every moment a fight against the rising danger. Yet in the heartbeat of fear, the man found strength in the dog's unwavering loyalty. Together, they would face the unknown, their bond the only light cutting through the forest's dark embrace. The forest closed tighter around them as the man and his dog moved with careful urgency. The path had vanished beneath layers of fallen leaves, and every step felt heavier with the weight of the stranger's silent pursuit. The dog's senses were stretched to the limit, ears flicking at the slightest sound, nose tracing the faintest scent. The man followed closely, his heart pounding in time with the dog's steady pace. They were running out of time, yet the wilderness offered no clear way forward, only the unyielding press of shadows. Suddenly, the dog stopped abruptly, tail stiff and eyes narrowing toward a dark gap between the trees. The man froze, feeling the sharp edge of danger cut through the quiet. The stranger was near, closer than they had dared to imagine. The dog's growl was soft but fierce, a low warning that held the promise of protection. The man's breath hitched as he scanned the trees, searching for any sign of the approaching figure. But the forest seemed to swallow the stranger whole, leaving only tension and fear in his wake. "Stay close," the man whispered, voice trembling with urgency. The dog pressed against his side, muscles taut and ready to spring. Together they moved toward the gap, knowing the next moment could decide everything. The man's mind raced, weighing each step with care. Trusting the dog's instincts had brought them this far, but the edge of the unknown loomed just ahead, a boundary they would have to cross if they wanted to escape. The wilderness held its breath once more, waiting to see who would claim the night. The narrow gap in the trees opened to reveal a small clearing, bathed in soft morning light. A breath of hope after the darkness that had clung to them like a shadow. The man and his dog stepped cautiously into the open, every sense still sharp, every muscle ready to respond. The stranger had vanished, swallowed by the forest as mysteriously as he had appeared. The dog's growl faded, replaced by a steady calm as he surveyed their surroundings. Still alert, but no longer burdened by the weight of immediate threat. The man knelt beside his loyal companion, brushing a hand through the dog's thick fur with a mixture of relief and gratitude. "We made it," he said quietly, voice trembling with emotion. The bond between them had deepened through the danger and fear, a silent promise forged in the wilderness. The dog's eyes met his with unwavering loyalty, a gentle reminder that they were not alone. Together, they had faced the unknown and emerged stronger, their escape a testament to trust and courage in the face of fear. As the forest around them began to wake with the sounds of birds and rustling leaves, the man took a deep breath, feeling the cool air fill his lungs like freedom itself. The wilderness had tested them, but it had not broken them. With the dog at his side, he knew they could face whatever lay ahead, whether shadow or light. They turned from the clearing, stepping forward into a new day, carrying with them the quiet strength of survival and the unspoken bond that had saved their lives. If you believe in the power of loyalty and the courage that comes from true friendship, hit that like button and subscribe for more gripping stories where every moment counts. Share this story to remind someone you care about the strength found in trust, and tell us in the comments. Have you ever had a loyal companion who saved the day? Your story might inspire someone else.